let's discuss a little bit, Rambo, about the Tua situation, because that has been the only story I feel like I can hear about these days. And I don't know exactly where I fall on it, as far as I don't know if there's even like really sides to it, you know? It's just like everyone's pretty upset because they feel like there was some malpractice behind the scenes that's led to career-threatening injuries to a player. And at first, I thought people might have been overreacting, and that a lot of the things that people were saying was happening behind the scenes, I didn't think there was much evidence for. Like, it felt like just a ton of speculation, and it just felt like people blowing things out of proportion like people might normally do. But the more that comes out about it, and the more that we find out, it seems like there really could have been shady something going on. It could have been as simple as Tua and or the Dolphins just wanted Tua to play, and so they did what they could to make that happen, and it ended up being a really bad decision. But I don't know. I don't know if either of us are educated enough on all the details of the situation to be able to give a super solid take on it, but did you have any thoughts about the whole situation?
Well, first of all, chat, sorry if there's any white screens, because I'm pulling up a bunch of stuff, because everybody's talking about this story, but I do like your perspective, because we're not pros. We're not pros at this by any means. But here, I gotta be careful with how I phrase this, because I don't want to mess anything up. Here's what I do know.
Yeah, full disclosure. Take everything we say with a grain of salt. Also,
yeah,
we may or may not be morons. That's up to your interpretation. Go ahead, Czar.
Yeah. That's what makes us great, though, right? But yeah, so be careful with how I phrase this. I was shocked. Let's kind of start back at the beginning for me. So I was shocked that Tua re-entered the Bills game. So that was already red flag number one for me.
Yeah.
And the fact, first, not only that, shout out to Tua, one of the only guys ever that could go back in a game concussed and win. Like, dog. I don't really know what else to say. He's just a dog. But everybody hating on Tua, you can go kick rocks. But now he gets the W against the Bills, and I didn't know what to expect. I thought on a short week, after looking at his symptoms, after him not being able to stand or jog or anything, I thought they weren't going to play him, but they did. And I was like, well, okay, must have just been some freak situation. Must have been a rarity, the exception to the rule, if you will. And he lands on his head in Cincy in the exact same manner he did a couple of days prior, and we all know what happened after that. So, with all that in perspective, if it was me, just based off what I know, I would not have put him in the game against Buffalo. I would not have let him return, and I would not have let him play against Cincinnati, especially because, A, you're on the road, you're not close to your team medical facilities at all. 2, it's a short week. So I would not. That was the big kicker for me. If you're going to let him come back and play the next week, it needs to be for a Sunday game. It doesn't need to be a short turnaround from Sunday to Thursday, especially when you're on the road. I don't know. I don't know what the doctor saw. The PA did an investigation, and the independent doctor was fired. So obviously he screwed something up somehow. But yeah, so I don't really know. My big takeaways, in short, there's a lot I could say. Should not have played the rest of the game against Buffalo. Should not have played against Cincinnati. And now, looking forward instead of looking to the past, looking in the future, I worry about the rest of his season and the rest of his career. Well, shoot, take it a step further and extrapolate that to the rest of his life, because, I mean, if you are a team doctor and you're specifically trained to deal with head injuries, you need to know about second impact syndrome and how devastating it is to people. Because you mentioned earlier how he had a career-threatening injury. You could almost say that it's a life-threatening injury, because second impact syndrome, if I get my words right, it can be fatal. So if you see anybody with a head injury, don't throw them back into the fire before their injury has healed, because if they get another concussion, you can have a really, really morbid result. Let me just put it that way. So I think the Dolphins put Tua, I think they put his career at risk, and honestly, I think they may have put his life at risk too, which is a big step to take, but I'm going to take it. Do I think they did it on purpose? No. I really don't think they'd set him up like that. I think they were I would call it negligent. That's the most technical term I have. The Dolphins were negligent, and I don't throw a lot of blame on Mike McDaniel, because he's going off what the trained practitioners say. So,
yeah, lots of good stuff.
I don't know. That's all I got. But there were a lot of red flags from the get-go, and I was shocked that he played. And to hear from Dr. Amalu, if anyone in chat has seen the movie Concussion that came out a few years ago with Will Smith's character, Dr. Bennett Amalu, he came out and he said that Tua should retire. He took the bold step in saying he should retire because the head injuries were just too much. So y'all can look up second impact syndrome. It's not the most complex thing. Basically, if you get a concussion and it's not healed, and you get another concussion, then that's just like the worst thing you could ever do for your head, especially in a contact sport that's somewhat violent. So, yeah, I would call it negligence. I'd say the Dolphins were negligent, and they should have known better, especially since they're there.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I'm interested to learn more concrete details on the situation. I wonder how long it'll be till, or even if we will get those kinds of details. Since the beginning, like the entire time that this situation has been going on, even since before the Bengals game, I've been looking at the situation mainly from like the point of view of Tua himself, like from his perspective, like kind of putting myself in his shoes. I think I just naturally put myself in the shoes of the player in situations like this. So I'm very interested to see Tua come out with a response or some kind of statement about the whole situation, like a real one, not just like a PR, minute detail calculated statement where he's just like, thanks to the Dolphins and the doctors for trying to take care of me now. I'm in the hospital recovering. Can't wait. Go Dolphins. Like, I want to see him really talk about the situation. Like, I want to really get his thoughts on it. Because for me, like I said, the whole time I've been putting myself in Tua's shoes when it comes to this whole situation. And for me, when you look at everything that's gone on with Tua since he was in college, had that nasty injury, was still drafted, missed his entire, I believe, first year as a rookie, and finally got a chance to come in and be the starter this year after having some rough play last year. For me, if I was in Tua's shoes and I get a bad hit to the head in that Bills game just before halftime, what's going through, well, obviously barring whatever might be happening due to the hit to the head, what would be going through my head in that scenario, under the conditions of what's happened to Tua in his life and NFL career up to this point, what I'm thinking is, I'm a young player. I know how good I am and how good I can be, and I haven't got a chance to prove it yet. Injuries have completely tripped me right out of the gate of my NFL career, and I don't want to be one of those guys who's just known for injuries. I don't want to be one of those injury busts, like those guys who never really were bad, like not just a bad player bust, but like I never really got a chance because I was just injured the whole time. So if I'm Tua, I'm like, I missed all this time due to a really bad injury. I finally am getting some real playing time. We've got a good squad around us, and we're winning games. We're catching fire. We're getting hot. There's a lot of talk about us. We got a chance to be the Bills right now, who are the number 1 team in the league. If I'm Tua in that situation, I'm like, I just took a hit to the head. It's football. I've taken hits to the head every day of my life, pretty much, for the past decade, or however long he's been playing football. You get what I'm saying. I'm thinking, I'm fine. I can play through this. I've always played through football. Football's a rough sport. You're always taking hits. It's just a little bit of pain. I can stomach that. My team needs me, and for the sake of myself, I have to keep playing for myself. That's what I am thinking into a situation with the Bills hit. So I don't know Tua's personality that well. I don't know Tua's thought process, obviously, but my inclination when that happens just before half of the Bills game, I would think going into the locker room and during halftime, he's telling the doctors, the coaching staff, I'm fine. Let me go back out and play. Now, regardless of him saying that, and I think this is where people are taking a lot of issue, it is the doctors or the coaching staff's job to look at Tua, to properly analyze what happened to him, diagnose him, and they have to be the ones to make that decision for him, unfortunately. Now, it may not be like that at every level. You might have to ask the player, because there's not going to be highly trained medical professionals at every level of football. In high school, it may be as small as an athletic trainer talking to the player, asking him how they feel, and the player makes the call. If the player says, "No, I can't go on," you can only analyze to a certain extent. But in the NFL, you presumably have the best of the best athletic trainers and doctors working on these players. So they, in the context of the NFL, have to be the ones to make that decision for him. Because not only is it just, I want to play football. In the NFL, this is my job. This is how I make my living. Some players have monetary incentives in their contracts. I don't know what Tua's contract is like. He's probably still on his rookie deal. I don't know all the details of that, not claiming to. But in general, for some players, I have to play, I lose money if I'm not playing, regardless of if it's an injury or not. And so some players have that incentive. For Tua, though, I believe it's a legacy incentive, and I'm young and haven't proven anything in the big league yet. I can't go out right now. This is a big game. This is a statement game. This is where I can prove myself a little bit. I need to be playing. So I'm assuming Tua is saying, put me in the game. Now, the problem is you pair that with the Dolphins, who have been pretty freaking bad at football for a long time. Not forever, but for a long time. And this is the, by far, most promising start to a season they've had in who knows how long. And you've got, I believe their head coach, he's a rookie head coach, right? Isn't this his first year to be a head coach? Am I correct in that?
Mike McDaniel, he was the offensive coordinator in San Francisco, your favorite team last year.
Exactly, though. So you've got, in the same boat as Tua, you've got a head coach who this is his first real shot in this position. It's his actual first shot in this position, but for Tua, it feels like his first real shot in this position. So from the head coach perspective, and I'm not saying he made the call or anything like that, but you've got very strong influences on the team whose interests are served with Tua going back in the game. That's Tua and the head coach, who are arguably the two most important pieces of the whole organization, your quarterback and your head coach. So both of them, because for the head coach, your best chance to win and have success is with Tua in the game. Obviously, he's your starting quarterback. So for both of them, they are desperately wanting Tua to get back in the game. I'm assuming that's what Tua wants. Obviously, like I said and prefaced, I don't know Tua's thought process. I'm just making assumptions based on how I would react in this situation. And I'm assuming, for the sake of my spiel, that this is Tua's thought process as well. But again, all of that comes back to the medical staff then. And I think in part the coaching staff, but mainly the medical staff, they have to do a proper analysis and diagnosis and make the call on if he is suitable to play or not. And there's all kinds of rules on the NFL concussion protocol and things like that. I'm still waiting more concrete details on what exactly went down. But regardless, Tua comes back in the game against the Bills. And I didn't watch the whole game live. I did watch the end of the game, but I didn't watch Tua other than his final drive. But from what I know, Tua looked and played completely fine the second half of the Bills game. Am I correct in that, or were you able to watch all that? Like, he didn't look like he was injured or concussed the second half of that game. He just looked like he was playing.
I'd say he looked pretty close to how he'd been playing. I think that's what gave a lot of people a false impression of his status. So I think he looked fine. Probably not like he was in the first half, but he looked fine to me.
Yeah, from the minuscule amount of his play that I saw from the second half of that game, I thought he looked fine. Now, the clip that everyone was making a big deal about from that Bills game was when he took that hit to the head. He immediately popped up, took 2 or 3 steps, and then stumbled and fell to the ground. And that's when but then he got himself up again and then was taken out of the game until after halftime. Most people that I've seen are of the opinion of, from that moment, you should have known, concussion, and he can't play again, at least today. Now, I think, again, like I said, I don't know all the details. I'm sure I'm missing some pieces of information. Also, like I said, take what I say with a grain of salt. I'm just kind of sharing my view of it at the current time. I believe it was reported that they said that him collapsing after that hit was due to a back spasm. Can you... Again, I'm saying, I do not think that's true, but can you Google real quick for me and see if that was reported? Because I really thought I heard someone say that the Dolphins reported that due to a back spasm, which again, I do not believe is the case.
He could have had a back spasm. I don't think a back spasm is gonna make you collapse like that.
I don't think it would either. And
when he went down, I did not see his actual hit. I thought he blew his knee out. If that tells you anything, because when you blow your knee out, everything just kind of gives, and you're just like, oh, well, fell down. That's what I thought happened. Yeah. Okay, according to Ian Rappaport, oh wow, Dolphins said Tua had a back injury from a QB sneak and his back locked up. Yeah, that's
probably cap.
Yeah, that's beyond. That's worse than cap. Yeah. I didn't see that report, and probably they did a good job of keeping that under wraps because that's command freaking stupid.
Anyways,
so, regardless to say that.
Yeah, regardless to say. So that all happened against the Bills, and that was week 3. That was their week 3 game. So then, after that happens, like I said, he looked like he played normal, but everyone still thought he might sit out a week because it was still a weird hit and a weird situation, the whole him getting up. But it was never officially reported whether or not he was definitely concussed, although it is pretty easy to tell that was most likely the case. So, one of the bigger issues is that they then played Thursday Night Football. So they played Sunday, their next game Thursday Night Football. That is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. That is 3 off days before their next game. 3 days off before the next game. That is 3 days of rest for Tua before he goes out to play football. Major contact sport once again. And so, even before that game, and like I said, to the naked eye, if you completely ignore that one hit, everything you saw from Tua, he looked fine. Like, even Rambo sent me a clip of, like, an interview he was doing with Ryan Fitzpatrick, and you even pointed out, you were like, he looks fine to me. Like, he's not acting like he has any head issues. I'm not saying you're stupid or anything. I'm saying, like, to everyone, including me, I was like, I mean, the hit and him getting up and stumbling all looks really fishy, but to the naked eye of the mass majority of America that is not trained medical professionals, he looked pretty fine. And when you look pretty fine, and you're the potential franchise quarterback of a team that's 3-0, 4-0, were they 4-0 or 3-0?
They were 3-0. It could have been 4-0 if they played their cards right, but...
Right. So, yeah, we haven't got to that game yet. We're about to get there. But yeah, so you're thinking, at that point, he looks fine. He wants to play more than anyone wanted Tua to play. Again, like I've said a bunch of times, I'm not claiming to know his thought process I'm very interested to see Tua come out with an in-depth response to the whole situation. But putting myself in Tua's shoes, no one wants Tua to play more than Tua himself. And then the head coach also wants him to play. And so I'm assuming Tua's saying to the entire team, I'm fine, I'm ready to go, let me play. And as we keep saying, it's the medical staff's job to tell him whether or not he should. So he goes out and plays against the Bills, or not the Bills this time, the Bengals this time. And everyone saw just another run-of-the-mill play, but he got slammed on a sack, smacked his head on the ground, and I thought this hit looked way worse than the one against the Bills, too. Like, not necessarily the hit, but his impact on the ground was very, for lack of a more descriptive term, not good. It was a very not good impact with the ground. And that's when you got the whole finger thing that everyone's seen. And he ends up getting taken out of the game on a stretcher, taken to the hospital. And this is when everyone on the internet, the media, the NFL world, blowing up with their takes about the situation. And this is kind of where we're at. We're told for now that he's fine. He traveled back home with the team, all that night, and they went on to lose against the Bengals, so they lost their undefeated season that they had up until that point. All of that happened, and it's just been a giant mess and a kind of a firestorm about this whole thing. People are calling for the heads of people on the medical staff, the coaching staff, people saying everyone needs to be fired, that like you mentioned, you could have potentially not just ruined this young man's season, his career, his life could have major problems and complications down the road because of this situation, all of which occurred within the span of 4 to 5 days, which is crazy. So after that, in the days following that whole situation, you get a specific medical staff member, some doctor that worked on Tua, was fired. Now, according to what I saw about it, a lot of people were just like thinking, oh, he's the one that screwed up, he's the one that should have held Tua out, it's his fault. Like, kind of just like he's almost like a fall guy for the casual media to look at and be like, okay, they got rid of the person that did the wrong, balance has been returned to the force, let's move on, that kind of thing. But from what I saw, the reason he specifically was fired was not because they found evidence of him committing malpractice on Tua's diagnosis and the handling of Tua's healthcare. From what I saw, I think it was discussed on Undisputed as well, was that he was fired for not complying with the investigation. Like, the NFL is conducting their own investigation, the NFL Players Association are doing an investigation on the whole situation to find out what happened and kind of where it went wrong. From what I understand, the medical person that was fired, the doctor that was fired, was not fired because they found evidence of him committing medical malpractice, but he was fired for not complying with the investigation, like being rude and argumentative about it. And so they just fired him for that reason. Not because they found any evidence of malpractice specifically, but because he wasn't complying and they had the right to fire him, and they just said, if you're not going to cooperate, you're out. And that's what happened, according to what I understand. Like I said, there's details that we don't know yet, and we also could have, I don't trust everything I see reported, so I am the first to admit any information that we have or that I regurgitate could be later proven incorrect. So just getting that out there. All of that being said, if I was the coach, the doctors, the Dolphins organization, let's just say whatever position it was, if I myself, Kyrogus, was in control of this situation from the start, how would I have handled it? And that's kind of a tough thing to answer. Some people say when it comes to injuries, specifically head injuries, you've got to treat it as if the circumstances of the team don't matter. That you have to only look at it from the standpoint of the player's health. And I understand that perspective and point of view, but I don't necessarily agree with it. It's kind of like the free will thing, how I think Tua, barring very clear evidence of it being a major lifelong health risk, I think barring that, which this very well could be / is a situation like that. But say it wasn't specifically a head injury. Say it was some injury that was, at high risk of being re-injured and injured worse, but wasn't necessarily lifelong threatening. You know what I mean? If I'm in that situation, I would say it's up to Tua. I would make sure he is very aware of what the situation is. Again, assuming that's not a head injury that can screw him up for the rest of his life. It could be something career-threatening, maybe, but, he can still... What did you command L for?
I've got some thoughts about this.
I haven't even finished my point yet, dude. I haven't even made a point yet.
Already getting spicy.
That's not even spicy. I literally have said nothing spicy yet.
It will be. Finish your point, though. Keep going.
I say at that point, I'm not saying it's 100% Tua's decision. I'm saying I would give the biggest say to Tua in a situation like that. Again, if it's not a head injury, a concussion injury that's going to ruin his life. That's not what I'm talking about. I said, specifically, if it's just any other injury that, it would be very dependent on what it is. I'm just saying, in general, in a situation kind of like this, I would want to give Tua most of the say. However, I would 100% put the team's interest first. And so you look at it this way. I guarantee Dolphins coach and Tua want to keep the fire and momentum that they have going alive. They start out, they're 2-0, have a good chance to go 3-0 against the Bills. Here's my thought process. The Bills, going into that game, were essentially the unanimous number one team in football going into that Dolphins game. They were very much hyped up to start the season. They had a great run that a lot of people think they got screwed out of a playoff win at the end of last season, and they blew out the teams they played in the first 2 weeks, one of which was the defending Super Bowl champions. So the Bills were peak of the mountaintop team in the football world, and the Dolphins at halftime realized we have a real shot to beat these guys. But going into that game, a lot of people, because of how on fire the Dolphins had been, were picking the Dolphins. I'm not going to say anyone was saying the Dolphins don't have a shot, but there is absolutely no confidence to be lost if you happen to lose a close game to the Bills. Playing a close game against the Bills at that point would have been impressive in itself, considering, like I said, they had blown out both of the teams they faced prior, one of which was the defending Super Bowl champions. So there's no confidence to be lost in losing to the Bills. Yes, you lose being undefeated. Yes, if you win, it's a major momentum and confidence boost. But you don't really set yourself backwards, I think, hardly at all if you lose to the Bills in that situation. Especially when it's because your quarterback couldn't play the second half. Literally, there is nothing to be lost. You had something to gain with beating the Bills, but nothing to be lost if you lost in that situation. So, if I am in control of the situation, I definitely do not play Tua the rest of that Bills game. And here's the biggest point. I don't know if point is the right word, but the biggest detail I want to point out, their backup is Teddy Bridgewater, right? That is one of the most solid backup quarterbacks you will find in the National Football League. He has a ton of starting quarterback experience. He played a long time with the Vikings. He played with a bunch of other teams. He's got a lot of experience. I'm not going to say he's a superstar, but Tua himself isn't proven to be a superstar. He had that amazing 6-touchdown comeback game, and that's the one definitive really good game he's had in his career because he hasn't got to play a lot. So you don't even know for certain what Tua is. You know what Teddy Bridgewater is, and he is as solid as backup quarterback to come. May not be a Cooper Rush, but he's as solid as backup quarterback to come. Had to throw a little humor in there, Rambo. We're talking about some heavy stuff. Because I have Teddy Bridgewater as my backup quarterback, I don't think for a second about playing Tua when he's at risk of re-injuring his head. So not only do I not play Tua the rest of that Bills game, I still have a good shot if I play Teddy Bridgewater. So that's what I do in that situation. And as everyone keeps pointing out, your next game after 3 off days is Thursday Night Football against the Bengals. A struggling Bengals, mind you. The Bengals were they? No, they had just beat the Jets. I was going to ask if they still hadn't won a game. They just beat the Jets. But a struggling Bengals team. They lost to the Mitch Trubisky Steelers. They lost to the Cooper Rush Cowboys. And their only win was against the Jets, who didn't even have their starting quarterback. So, the Bengals were extremely down bad. Again, with Teddy Bridgewater as your backup quarterback, on the Dolphins, I have an amazing shot to beat the Bengals with Bridgewater. And now, I don't remember the exact, betting odds or whatever. I think most people were expecting the Dolphins to beat the Bengals, but I think the Bengals might have been 1-point favorites or something. Either way, throwing that noise out of the way, I genuinely think, without all the drama and controversy, if they spin, even though it's a short week, if at halftime of the Bills game, they say to Tua, listen, this is one game, maybe 2 or 3 games for you to fully recover. Even if we start out 3-3, our season rides on you being here the whole rest of the year. You are not playing the second half of this Bills game. And you're not going to play Thursday Night Football. You may be back after that, but we cannot have you, when you just took that shot to the head, play the rest of this game and play another full game in 3 or 4 days. We can't have that. Plus, we got Bridgewater. He's not going to take your job. You're still the future and face of our franchise. But Bridgewater is a very solid backup with a lot of experience. We're going to play him for 3 halves. And that's going to be okay. Because the rest of our season and the next decade of our franchise depends on it. So you're going to sit for 3 halves. And Tua might be like, I want to play, I'm fine. But you have to make that call. If I'm the head coach, no matter what the medical staff says, just on the eyeball test, I understand it's your rookie season as a head coach. You want to have a lot of early success. You want to keep the fire going. But if I'm the head coach, no matter, even if the medical staff clears him and says he can play, I am not taking that chance with my 23, 24-year-old potentially face of the franchise quarterback. So if I'm in the head coach's position, no matter what position it is, if I'm in control of the situation, I'm telling Tua he has to sit 3 halves. Just 3 halves. Never mind Command W. You understand, most of my takes I open with a devil's advocate take, and then I tell you what I actually think. That's why I was like, you're jumping the gun. I haven't even made my point yet.
You just scared me because you were talking about the free will thing, and I was like, man, I don't know.
I said that's my gut reaction in situations like these, but looking at this specific situation, that's not what I think. Going back,
fair.
So with Bridgewater, you have a very solid chance to beat the Bengals and a very solid chance to close out that game against the Bills. Probably not as good of a chance. I would say almost certainly not as good of a chance as with Tua. But say this. Say Bridgewater goes out there, even if they lose to the Bills in that second half. Bridgewater just got a half of warming up. I would say football experience, but he has enough football experience. But recency, being warmed up is a real thing. So he played a whole half of football to get warmed up against what's probably the best team in football. So he gets a lot of warming up done in the second half of that Bills game. Whether they win or lose, it's all right. Then, instead of forcing Tua to play, and I understand it's a short week, but you spend that short week just going into it, getting everyone prepared. Everyone knows we're running with Bridgewater. Let's get him suited up, build our game plan around Tua or around Teddy, and go and play the Bengals. I think they lose to the Bengals because Tua goes out. Everyone's a chicken with their head cut off. It's complete chaos, and you just throw Teddy in there for the first time this season. Imagine he got a half to play against the Bills, and even though it's a short week, imagine they game planned with Bridgewater the whole short week up until Bengals. I think Teddy maybe closes the game out against the Bills, but even if we say he doesn't, I think he has a real shot, and under the conditions of a half of warming up against the Bills and a week of prepping with him, I think they beat the Bengals. And now, obviously hindsight is 20/20, so of course I can say this now, but I'm telling you, this is what I would have done in that situation without understanding what happened. Understanding the risk, though. Now, what are you right now? You're 3-1, and your franchise quarterback is under extreme, controversial, career-threatening injury risk. What are you if you just sit him for 3 halves? Probably still 3-1, and Tua's completely healthy and ready to go moving forward. And you're not one of the most, I'm not going to say hated, but the Dolphins are under a lot of bad publicity right now.
They're getting close to being the villains of the league. Every year,
but it's not the players. It's like the organization. The organization.
Every year, the fans kind of pick their villain for the season. Usually, it's a player or it's a group of players or whatever. It's the offensive or defensive side of the ball for one team. I've never really seen a fan base a league fan base go after the organization while excluding the players. So, publicity-wise, this is bad. Now, from a competitive standpoint, if they're playing the Bills, you're talking about how they want to beat the Bills just because the Bills are good. But getting that divisional win at home against the Bills is a steal.
Yes, like I said, you do get a lot out of getting that win, and I guess it is a divisional game, so technically you lose a bit if you lose. But I think the pros and cons are extremely disproportionate.
I agree.
And so, like I said, hindsight is 20/20, obviously. So anyone who's seen the result of a situation can go back and say, "Oh, this is how they should have played it. It would have turned out fine." But you would think, and I would think, if you're running an NFL team in any capacity, you would think they're of the greatest football minds in the world, and they can think through this, what I'm saying, because I'm able to think through it. This is exactly what I would have told you at halftime of the Bills game with the information they had. I'm not claiming to be, a football guru or that I'm the oracle and can see the future. I'm not a doctor, but it's pretty clear to see. It's pretty easy to weigh the pros and cons in that situation. So, the Dolphins, in my opinion, easily could be 3-1. That worst case scenario, they're 2-2 with a healthy Tua, and they know how potentially awesome they can be. They just had a couple of bad weeks because of some injury risk with Tua. There is no problem with that. If your thought is that, we're not going to lose when we got Tua playing, then just go 15-2 after that. Obviously, I don't think that would happen, clearly, but, they had no reason to be so aggressive about playing Tua no matter what in week 4. There's no reason. Against the struggling Bengals. And like I said, I do think situations matter. So, say he had the injury in a conference championship. Obviously, in that situation, I'm probably putting Tua back in to try to win that game, and then I'm playing him in the Super Bowl. Obviously, you get 2 weeks of rest between the Super Bowl, but you get what I'm saying. If it's a game of that importance, my point is it's weeks 3 and 4. It does not matter. It doesn't matter. In proportion to how much it matters that Tua doesn't get hurt. I'm not saying, in comparison. You know what I mean? Because say Tua... Yeah. So, the only thing we know so far, the only thing we actually know so far, the only official statement that's been released about Tua's injury time is that he's out at least 1 week, which I think is pretty hilarious that that's all they've said. Because there are some who say Tua's out for season, don't play Tua the rest of the season, and others have pointed out, there's some that say Tua's career should be done, because with whatever it's called, taking 2 concussions in that short a span of time is life-altering, can be life-altering. So some people say he should retire, some people say he should be out for season. The Dolphins say, 1 week for now is okay. We'll see how we're feeling after a week. And I don't think there's any universe in which forcing him to play under those risks in weeks 3 and 4 is worth it, when you know that could potentially be on the line. So, I don't necessarily think I would label it medical malpractice. Certainly. Negligent, yes. Stupid and just bad strategically, yes. I don't know if I would say it was criminally... It was a criminal level of malpractice. I don't know if I would say that for sure, but Was it stupid and absolutely the wrong choice? What they did? Yes. And I think for the most part, that's about all I have to say.
If this case, let's put it this way, just for the sake of talking, because I love to talk. But if this went to court somehow in some alternate universe, if this goes to court and Tua's like, you know what, I'm tired of being classy, screw the Dolphins, I'm getting the bag. I wonder how that would go. I feel like they would really. I feel like the prosecution would really, really have a shot.
I think it would probably favor Tua, but there would have to be extensive investigations done.
There would be, but just for the sake of argument. But if you look at it from that perspective, you're like, ooh, this just wasn't a good look, period. But all that to say,
yeah, this really sucks for the game of football more than anything, because
it does.
The sport truly is the safest it has ever been to play, but the court of public opinion is obviously what most likely holds the future of the sport, because if everyone believes it's dangerous, a lot of people aren't going to put themselves or their children or whatever in that situation to play. And so it really sucks for that reason. I'd say, other than Tua's health risks, that's the biggest thing that sucks about it, is the court of public opinion on football is just going to think, this is too dangerous to be, realistic kind of thing. So that sucks a lot.
It does. You just hear like all the moms that want to take care of their kids. They're like, nope, my baby's not playing football. I'm not dealing with any head injuries. So I'm just like, well, it's kind of hard to argue with you because nobody really wants that either. And then, you could go into how safe football is. It's just hard to convince people as it is. And then when you see this actually happen in real time on the field, you're just like, man, it's just tough. It's tough from multiple different fronts. So, especially on a short week too. That's my thing. Like on a short week, they still decide to play him. I feel like it's a common theme this season. We've seen it with Tua, and to a lesser extent, honestly, I'd say we've seen it with Dak. When he hurt his hand, Jerry goes on 105.3 The Fan, and he says, "Oh, he'll be back in a couple of weeks."
Yes, but granted, that didn't happen. So
it didn't happen, but people need to start keeping it real. Like when people are giving injury updates on guys' status, I mean, they need to when they go in with expectations that are super lofty, I think that creates the potential for problems. Thankfully, they didn't rush Dak back. His injury also wasn't as bad. They did rush Tua back on an injury that was way worse, and look what happened.
Yeah.
So I hope this doesn't become a trend. I don't think it will be, but I do worry because I heard some reports on Cameron Brate kind of getting screwed as well. So I don't know. It does kind of worry me, but we'll have to see. This hasn't really been a huge problem as far as I'm aware. Maybe the players will come out and say something. I don't know. Interesting. It's an interesting discussion for sure. You can talk about that for hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sum it all up, it's awful. I hate it.
Yeah, it sucks.